I have 6 games lined up for this evening, and thank you all very much for being here. I wanted to just take a look. Basically, first game is from SWWI, and yeah, let's get right to it. Sorry about this. Looks like the screen cut out for a second. Sorry about that. But yeah, first game from SWWI, and here we go. Awesome. All right, cool. Sorry about that. But yeah, so basically this is SWWI Vera Setov's game, and yeah, let's take a look. Looks like the Vienna game, early bishop c5. That's called the Anderson defense. I also think it can be, I think Frankenstein Dracula comes out of this line. That's what I remember being called. But basically an early Vienna game, and yeah. Hey, good evening, Aphelion. Thanks very much for joining the stream. Thanks for being here. But yeah, so basically this is an early Vienna. White plays kind of a less aggressive line, d3. Basically here, you know, there are lines that involve knight to f3, knight to g5, and basically this ends up being, you know, fairly good for white. White's showing, you know, equality here. I guess maybe, I don't know, knight to a4 is considered to be better chasing the bishop, but d3 I know from experience is just fine. Knight f6, knight f3. Here I'd play bishop to g5. I'd start the attack as white and see how that goes. But it's really up to, you know, it's really up to white how to play this. The way that I play these types of games, I generally try to transpose them into you know, the Italian game. Have a lot of threats on d8, have threats with knight d5, that type of thing. And overall, I think it's basically ends up being pretty solid for white. d6, d3, knight f6, and then bishop g5 here is better than knight f3. But overall, white's looking fine. This threat's not really going to go anywhere. If white wants to, he can play h3, bishop to h4, g4 here. In the opening book, h3 is one of the common lines in this game. h3 is played. Bishop to h5, and then basically, you know, there's a fork between whether, you know, white commits to a full g4 or whether white plays a move like bishop to g5 or castles instead. Overall, I think everything's fine. So far in this opening, I think everything's been intuitive, and we're still within the opening book, so this all makes sense to me. White castles, he chooses that line. And here, you know, we've gotten back into a larger branch of the Vienna game. Now it's you know, Vienna verging on Italian game type position. But bishop g5 looks like it makes the most sense to me. It pushes pressure on d8. Put knight to d5, I think that's good as well. And here, basically, I don't know. I mean, white's going to start to have some opportunities. I'm looking at knight d5 as a potential tactic. Knight d5 can be pretty dangerous. Puts a lot of pressure on d8, puts pressure on f6. It's going to involve basically black getting doubled, you know, doubled pawns on the f file. And I think basically here I would play, yeah, knight to d5. I think is a fine way to do it. g4, bishop g6, knight d5, rook e8. I'm not sure I would have played it with the bishop going to g6 first. Here I probably would have, you know, I probably would have played knight takes f6, maybe bishop to h4. But overall, this position's shifted dramatically towards white. You know, once these pawns get doubled, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for white to attack on the king side. Overall, I really like this play. This is very similar to the types of play that I do in my games, so I think I have some ability to talk about it. So yeah, so in this line, knight to d7, bishop to g5, castles. This is a little bit slower. In this situation, the knight was developed to d7, and that sort of diffuses bishop to g5 as a threat in general here. White can play g4 if he wants, pretty safely. You know, there's not really going to be too many double-edged attacks, and, you know, if there are, you know, white will get mobilized on them much sooner. So I think g4 is good. g4, bishop g6, knight h4. That seems pretty good. a3, h6, bishop e3. Overall, you know, we're at about equal position. Bishop takes, knight takes, g4. I'm a little confused by why white took so long to play g4, to be completely honest. You know, g4 becomes playable at move 7. And instead, in fact, it's in the opening book on move 7. But instead, basically g4 isn't played until, some of white's best attacking chances are off the board. It's particularly dangerous if the bishop is on g5. Hey, welcome, our Paradox. Thanks for joining the stream. Thanks for being here. So this knight takes g4, pawn takes g4, bishop takes, and white's looking pretty good. He's going to have to be cautious to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks in terms of threats on the king side. But I think rook to h1, queen to e2, rook to g1. Overall, white's fine, and I don't think there's going to be any problems here for white. Knight f6, rook g1. And basically king f1 is a proactive defensive move. In general, I'm usually pretty slow to play those. But I understand it. With king f1, you're basically ending threats of threats on the king. Cool. Yeah, thanks for sending that, Eric. I appreciate it. I'll add it to my list. I think it should be your game will be at 8 a.m. on May 26th. So thanks for sending it, Eric. In general, I try to make them go through the Discord. I'm super happy. You can feel free to send as many as you like. And feel free to send. Feel free to send as many games as you like. And if I see them in the Discord, I'm not gonna not take them or anything. But the way to usually send them, Eric, is through the Discord game submissions thing. That usually works pretty well. Yeah, no worries, Amandus. Okay, no problem. I'm curious to see if I would send the same game again. But in any case, I have a lot of... If you want to send a different one, Amandus, we can take a look at it. Otherwise, I have plenty of other material to take a look at. It's up to you. If you want to send a different one, we can... we can take a look at it. So, anyways, I don't think that's tonight, to be honest, Amandus. Unless okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for sending it, Eric. But feel free to send it on my Discord. That was probably the best route to go. So yeah, feel free to send it on my Discord game submissions. But just so I know, Amandus, what name is yours under? Just because I have the schedules on the Discord. Like on the upcoming schedule, you're playing the game against TTRV. I don't think that's for tonight, Amandus, to be honest. I think that's for... Yeah, no worries. Sorry about that. But yeah, feel free to send me a different one. Feel free to send me a different one, and we will take a look at it. But yeah, just send a different one, and I'll just replace it in the same slot that it's in. Okay, so going back to this game, basically, king f1 is a proactive defensive move. I think queen e1 probably is a better play. Queen e1, knight h5, king to h2 maybe. But overall, white's looking pretty good here. Queen e1 is given as the refutation. It's going to be kind of a difficult move, defending and dealing with this knight. This is not so clear how, white should defend this. Maybe king to f1. King to f1 is fine. I'm looking at if there are other non-engine lines here. So I'm thinking the lines along queen to d2 is probably a little better. Queen to e1 is given as 1 plus 1.56. But overall, I think queen to e1, queen to e3 is probably the plan in either case. But I guess playing this move king f1 sort of kills the tempo. Anyways, king f1, d5, pawn takes, bishop takes, and here I think I would probably play rook takes g4 is getting suggested. That's a tactically complicated move to play. I'm wondering about bishop to b3. I guess this causes problems. with rook a d8. So yeah, so maybe gaining tempo on the gaining tempo here is important. I don't know. Queen e1 is getting suggested as the best move here. I'm thinking that's because okay, so basically Queen e1 doesn't have many special characteristics to it. What I was kind of curious about was why Queen e1 was better than Queen to d2, and the answer is because it supports the knight. So if you play Queen to d2 and Black plays d5, then on knight takes d5, this is a reasonable fork. But the knight is undefended if the queen plays to e7 or something. Here you can't play pawn to, or say e6, because d7 is not tactically correct. But if you play queen to e6 here and then play pawn takes d5, this ends up being better for black. So because the knight hangs. But if you play to e1 as opposed to d2, so Queen e1 as opposed to d2 here. Now on e4, on d5, you can play knight takes e5, and then if the queen goes to e6, then you can play pawn takes e6, and the knight successfully defended. That was the distinction between those two moves. I didn't necessarily see that, I didn't see that until we played a move in, but that's why Queen d2 is better than, or Queen e1 is better than Queen to d2, because it supports the knight on pawn takes d5. That's the difference between those two. In any case, basically White's going to have to deal with this kind of emerging center for Black, and the way to head it off is, by moving the queen off of this diagonal. So in this situation, Queen e1 is better, and then on d5, Knight takes e5, and any other move by White here will make Knight takes e5 unplayable. So like say King f1, then d5, then Knight takes e5, and I'm pretty sure this ends up in a rough situation for White. So yeah, bishop to h3. I guess this is playable, but it's not better. If you play queen to e1 as opposed to king f1, you end up in a better position where this knight can be sustained on e5 comfortably with the queen as defense. Anyways, king f1, e takes d5 is fine, pawn takes d5, and knight takes d5 hangs a piece. So bishop h3, king e1, knight takes d5, and black's just objectively better. So yeah, I mean, this isn't super complicated, right? I mean, this exchange loses a piece. It loses a piece to this bishop to h3 move, and then gets to move off of that. It basically moves to the h3 diagonal with check. That's what makes it not a trade. So like you would say, all right, knight takes, White is basically looking at this position in a tactically incorrect way. Knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and then White's seeing rook takes. So White's looking for that combination. But there's an error there because here the bishop can just play to h3, and this rook takes g4 that ends the combination is no longer available to White. So now this piece just hangs. King e1, knight takes d5, bishop takes, queen takes, and this ends up in a situation where Black has basically won a pawn. Black's up one pawn here, and looking good in this position. So anyways, interesting situation, yeah, cool, interesting game. Continuing on through this, what ends up happening was that original line that I was talking about. Black misses the opportunity here with bishop to h3, and basically ends up hanging that bishop on g4 for nothing. White's still looking for ideas, but basically there's been some, there's been some tactical errors by Black. So yeah, all right, White ends up a rook up after the late middle game and walks in a victory. Very interesting. The pieces looking at this, hey, you have your own line in the Traxler Aphelion, so, I'm going to play the Traxler line of the Aphelion, or the Aphelion line of the Traxler, every time you send a game in. I think we're committed to that. Send in on whatever server. Yeah, Lee Chess is fine. Chessgames.com is fine. Whatever works, Limestone. I'm just going to take the PGN and put it on chess.com no matter what. So, however you want to send is fine. So yeah, white's looking pretty good. Knight f3, bishop g4, h3, bishop h5. And basically, white's looking solid. You know, the opening is intuitive. Knight e7 supports knight f6. And the good things for white basically happen, you know, after g4 and after pressure, you know, after pressure starts getting exerted on the king side. This sacrifice is not super sound. Okay, yeah, no problem, Eric. I got it. It's the game that you sent is in for May 26th at 8 a.m. Eastern time. But yeah, I've got it. I put it on my list, Eric. So yeah, all of this sort of trades off. It comes to a relatively tactically complicated, hey, welcome, Bishop Hurricane. Sorry, I think, I must have missed you the first time, but yeah, good to see you. Thank you for joining the stream, Bishop Hurricane. I appreciate you being here. Knight takes d5, bishop takes, rook takes, and basically white's good. Rook e8, queen e2. White's, you know, basically black mishandles this this center. You know, he basically hangs a piece that he doesn't need to. So the real key part of this game came down to a tactical position. I thought all of this middle game, yeah, no, sure, totally. And, you know, if we go through it too quick, we can always do some opening analysis based off of the game. So anything you want to send in, Limestone, is great. Bishop to g5, castles, a3, h6. And white's just better. You know, this is sort of the high point for black. You know, white's sort of losing his way. And, you know, with that knight sacrifice, which is unsound and white successfully can defend against, the situation starts going well for white. There's one key, so the key portion of this game is basically handling these tactics in the center. I don't like spending time analyzing tactics because I can't do it as well as the computer can. And nor can any other person. So basically, here the tactical maneuver is, you know, the best line for white is e takes d5, bishop h3, and basically the king gets off of that diagonal. Instead, you know, black plays pawn takes d5, and then, you know, white makes a tactical error. Knight takes d4, which loses to bishop to h3. But instead, black misses this opportunity. So, you know, white instead plays, or, you know, basically, black misses this opportunity and instead plays through the trade that allows rook takes g4. So basically a tactical miscalculation in this case swings the game by 6 or 7 points. You know, here, black, you know, with correct play, and if black sees h3, then black's going to be up 4 points here. Instead, black doesn't see that, gives up g4, and is losing by 3.5. So that's really the decisive part of this game. At the end of the day, that's kind of a need for tactical study. Overall, I basically liked how this game was played. This was a fine tactic here for white. Queen takes e8, rook takes, everything's good. And yeah, white's just cruising. Solid situation, solid position, and yeah, a win for white. So in terms of reevaluating this game, you know, I think positionally you played it in a reasonable way. I might have played g4 a little sooner. You know, g4 becomes playable here. g4 is the computer best line here. If you play g4 here, you can exert pressure on f6 indefinitely. Instead, you know, things get sort of awkward after, you know, bishop e3, and you have to decide, you know, whether to trade the bishop or not. I think bishop takes c5 I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, it sort of brings the knight forward, and, you know, there's not really, you know, this bishop's not exerting that much pressure on white's position. So bishop takes c5, knight takes c5, and white's basically fine. This sack was unsound for black, and then this middle gameplay was unsound for black. So I guess my main suggestion here was, you know, really, you know, both players missed some opportunities in this middle game. White missed the tactical shot bishop to h3, which would have won for black, and then black missed it as well. So, you know, it ended up trading into an equal position that white was able to capitalize in and win. But the end situation was, you know, basically that, you know, basically in the end situation, it was determined by tactical misplay in the center in the middle game. Um, from a strategic perspective, I would say an earlier g4 is good for white. Trading off c5 is probably not good for white, and that's sort of that. There's not too much in terms of there wasn't too much in terms of tactical improvement outside of that situation. You basically played well. Both players played well into a relatively equal middle game, and then one player misstepped, and then the game was determined. That happens a lot. Not a super complicated situation, but yeah. Bishop d2, bishop e3. I don't know. The main improvement here was an earlier g4. The engine suggests it, and with g4 played, you're not particularly vulnerable, and this bishop is displaced on g6. That's my main improvement. I think white played a pretty good game. Accuracy probably doesn't fairly represent it. Still a pretty accurate game, but I know it was drawn down a little bit by the late game anyways. So, overall, very good game. Good playing, SWWI, and thank you very much for sending it over. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sending it and for contributing material to review on the stream. I really appreciate it. All right, let's take a look. This is I think this is a novelty opening. It's not one that I know. The English opening Great Snake variation, named exotically. I guess. Hey, welcome Tranquil. Thanks for joining the stream. But yeah, so here c4, g6, g3. White's looking pretty solid, in the early game. Let's see if there's any kind of missteps here. But I think basically White's going to end up in a situation where he ends up, maintaining the initiative out of the English. e3 here is a little slow. Basically the issue with e3 is that it's basically playing a supportive move for something that isn't yet there. Basically e3 is played to support d4, and if d4 is not played, then White's just not capitalizing on center opportunities. There's nothing particularly inflexible about d4, so there's no reason to hold it back. White here, can comfortably play e4. That's what's in the book. But d4 here, I think, leads to a very reasonable English opening position. I guess part of it is probably that, White doesn't like playing d4. That's probably why he plays c4. But anyways, it's up to him whether to play that or not. But d4 was objectively better in this situation. It controls the center and leads to White maintaining the initiative pretty easily. d4 is still playable. We'll see how long it takes White to actually play d4, but d4 is kind of a glaring move for White. White seems to be developing all around it. Rook e1 I don't like. I think now you really do have to play d4. Developing the rook to a not open file is not helpful. Like, this is basically just a waste of tempo, right? It's not a bad move, it's just not an efficient move. If you move rook e1, you're developing your rook from one closed file to the next closed file. So, there are pieces that you can develop effectively here, so you should develop those. d4 at least moves this bishop towards getting this open file, so d4 is what White should play. Rook e1 just doesn't improve anything at this given point in time. Maybe there are plans that involve that rook being on the e file that White's indirectly developing towards, but I think that's pretty speculative. Overall, bishop g4, queen d2. White's just looking good. White has the initiative. Moves like c5 c5 is interesting. This displaces the knight, but it does relieve the tension in the center. I have to think about whether c5 is a good idea or not. Like, basically with c5, this center becomes fixed and favorable to black. Black's going to have control over the e4 square probably for the rest of the game if you play c5. So, I don't know. I feel like better plans might involve rook c1, c takes d5, but it's up to White to kind of figure this out. Knight to d7, knight f4, e5, and I think White's just fine. Here's a tactical blunder. This looks pretty bad. Bishop takes here. Bishop takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, rook takes. Just loses loses two pieces for a rook. That's a little bit silly. It plays out well for White. But overall here, it looks like a relatively solid English center. D4 is, d4, b3 is probably fine. But things go badly for white after. So c5, I have some questions about. If the game's really decided after this tactic, we will we'll steer back to it. Here, knight g4 is the move. Knight g4 basically secures a double attack. If you play knight g4, you're attacking the f6 bishop and the g2 bishop. And then if the bishop takes b2, then your queen attacks along this diagonal and threatens a mate on h6 while the king is still attacking g2. So this basically cements a double attack for white. Anyways, this looks good. And white's just cruising. You know, I think basically black is, you know, equals plus maybe, but should be a draw. I guess white's technically down a pawn, but not really. And now, wow. Now, black seriously misplays this endgame. Okay, interesting thing that happened there. All right, so going from front to back here, you know, d5 could be played a little bit earlier. I would have played d5 before I played e3. That secures control of the center earlier. You're going to end up playing d4 here, and then, you know, eventually, so you might as well just, you know, control the center, impede black's development as quickly as possible. Rook e1 is inefficient, so a takeaway, I think rook e1 is not the positionally correct move. You know, moving the rook from one closed file to the other doesn't really help. d4 instead. You know, if you can get this e file to be open, then definitely, you know, rook e1 makes sense. But if you're just moving, you know, there's no advantage to moving the rook to e2, so the file is closed. So that's an inefficient move by white. One I would take back, and I would play d4 over it. Okay, b3, bishop g4, knight to e4. Overall, I like white's position. You know, here in this situation, white has to sort of decide what his long-term plans are. White has better center control. You know, black is, you know, black basically has one developed pawn in the center. White has a space advantage on the queen side too. He has these two pawns to black's less advanced pawn structure. But I don't know. I'm thinking f3, knight f4. Should be okay. The engine is suggesting c takes d5. I'm not a huge fan of simplifying this. You know, the good thing is on pawn takes, you give, you know, basically you've made the pawn structure symmetrical and you're giving yourself a file for the rook. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of wondering if there are other moves other than c takes d5 that work out here. Like, I'm wondering maybe rook to c1 here, how that eval plays out. I think that's better than c5. With rook ac1, you have a more legitimate threat on d5. You know, if you can get this, you know, basically here, if you can get the, if overall, did black do a good job against the English? I mean, the answer to that is basically no, to be completely honest. You know, it's a good question, Tranquil. You know, I think black played a reasonable game. But, you know, considering that white played this fairly passively, I think black had some good opportunities. You know, like here, like, you know, before knight d7, e5 puts a lot of pressure on white to cement the center. Basically, e5 forces d4. If d4, you know, white has seemed to be afraid to play d4 in this game, so e5 will really cause white problems if white does not play d4. If white instead, you know, tries to play like d3, this is going to lead to a good position for black. So I think that black did, you know, black did a fine job. You know, I don't think there was anything like, you know, concretely wrong with black's play. But, you know, considering white played relatively passively, I think black could have played more aggressive moves to try to get to equality. It makes sense. There's no problems with it. It's just, you know, it's a little bit, white played a little quietly, and then black played very quietly to not challenge. Even an e5 type move here, you know, I don't know if that's tactically playable, but say like an e5 here, you know, really does challenge white a lot more. So as, you know, if looking at black's position, I say, move more towards like e5. Challenge the center, play moves like e5, c5, that kind of play. Basically leaving the center closed and unchallenged. It leads white to have sustained positional advantage. Black needs to do something to challenge effectively, either e5 or c5 or maybe d5, maybe. I'd have to look to see if d5 works, but some center challenge needs to come from black. So I think that I think this relatively passive play by black here, just it wasn't aggressive enough. So anyways, bishop takes c5, and here I think white should not try to diffuse the center here. I think instead white should play rook to c1, rook to c1, and then pawn takes d5. Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Tranquil. And, everybody, just always feel free to ask questions. I'm here, my goal is just free lessons, basically. So I'm always happy to go through stuff. I'm happy to, take a look at anything that you're interested in. And, yeah, please ask as many questions as you like. Please, if I explain anything badly, just feel free to tell me. And, so, yeah, thank you for asking the question, Tranquil, and thanks for participating. So rook ac1, puts pressure on d5. c5 diffuses the center for white. Basically here there's lasting tension, but with c5, now you've given black some fixed targets. You don't really know, basically this, this center, it's sort of ambiguous. I guess maybe white still controls the center, but not really. This d5 faces off pretty well against this d4, so... I think c5 is an overextension. Another issue with c5 is that it can lead to b6 being played. If b6 is played here, this whole side can potentially get undermined. I guess this isn't the right time to do it. You probably want to, maybe prepare it for a move or two. But b6, basically c5 could potentially provide a fixed target for black to attack on the queen side. Okay, e5, right. So e5, nice. Also with c5, it blocks. Yeah, it definitely does. It closes off this diagonal for that bishop. Yeah, it does. No, I mean it does definitely. And it also the light squared bishop. Yeah, sorry, I thought you said the dark squared bishop. Yeah, absolutely. This light squared bishop is now bad on this diagonal in a very sustained way. This bishop is going to be biting on, d5, c6 for the rest of the game. It's probably going to have to go to it's either going to have to find a way to get traded off or play bishop f1. But yeah, absolutely. That totally slows down, the bishop here. And now it's basically the fianchetto is blocked off to it. Fianchetto is no longer a good bishop. Yeah, no, I was thinking that this bishop also becomes worse, but the white squared bishop is very fixed on a closed file. So yeah, good point. c5, knight d7, knight f4. e5 is the error, I think. Sorry, not e5 is the error. e5 is the move here. This is the good break. I would have played e5 earlier. E5 here, and I think so knight d5. E5. I'd have to calculate it out, but there have been multiple situations where an e5 or c5 break has sort of been needed by black, and I'm happy that black finally plays it here because this move basically needs to be played. If the d5 pawn trades off for the e5 pawn trades off for the d4 pawn, black goes from basically equal to winning in the center now. D takes e5, knight takes e5, and black is actually significantly better in the center. So that's just something to consider. Bishop f3, knight takes, bishop takes, king takes. Yeah, looks good for black. This is equalized, and this was the game. Yeah, this all, this was pretty disastrously bad. Rook takes, so here king e6 and things sort of hold together. So say rook takes b7 here, black will have rook to h5 as a response and be able to kind of at least generate chances on this king. But now with the bishop back to, or with the king back to e8, this is going to play out badly. This rook will get traded off and the pawn will get lost immediately after that. So bad stuff for black. Yeah, so interesting. So in this game, the takeaways that I would go for, I think d4 was needed for white to do center control. Rook e1 was particularly inefficient. This didn't really help the rook's mobility at all. d4 instead was much better than rook e1. d4 eventually gets played, and then here I would prompt I would prompt white with e5. Hey, welcome, Ahmet. Thanks for joining the stream. But yeah, so e5, pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, and that's the best break for black. Now c5 is a little bit of an overextension, I think. e5 was good. E5 is a good move for sure. I think it would have been better earlier, to be honest, but anyways, and then there's a tactical miss here. So here, we looked at this. Bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, bishop takes f3, and then on bishop takes, rook takes, and white gets 2 pieces for the rook. So better for white. This was a blunder. White misses it, and it goes into an equal rook and pawn endgame. And then there's basically a big correction in the endgame, or big improvement in the endgame. Don't move your king to the 8th rank if there's a rook on the 7th. So if you're getting checked by a, I don't know. This one probably isn't absolutely true, but it's very frequently true. In this type of situation, there's no reason to play your king back to the e8 file. The black king is only going to get worse if the rook is on the 7th and the king is on the 8th. It's basically cutting off, the king just decides to cut himself off from the rest of the board by playing to e8. Instead, play king to e6. There, the king is at least centralized. So yeah, so if a rook checks you on the rule I was trying to think of is, if the rook checks you on the 7th, don't move to the 8th. Move to the 6th in an endgame situation. If you play rook to h7, king e8, then this king is blocked off from the rest of the game. It should go the other way. Go the other way, stay in the game, and that plays out much better for black. After all this happens, white ends up a rook, and the game ends. So front to back, just the quick things to rehash. Rook e1 is inefficient for white. It doesn't improve the rook's mobility. Do something that either challenges the center or works towards advancing white's development. Rook e1 just moves the rook from one immobile file to the next. Second thing, c5 I thought was, c5 we were saying blocks off both the bishops, blocks off the dark squared bishop on that diagonal, and it also blocks off the, hey, thank you very much for thanks very much for the follow. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mole Man. I'm a Simpsons fan myself, so I get the reference. Yeah, c5, and then the knight goes to d7 or a8. But c5 pushing here, worsens both of the bishops. That's the error. So here, e5, pawn takes. E5 should have happened a few moves earlier. And then there's a tactical misplay. And then in an equal endgame, there's this misplay with the black king responding to the check. This is the most decisive error of the game, playing to e8 as opposed to e6. And rook takes b7, rook to e7, and I think white's just won. So yeah, interesting game, interesting situation, and the improvements are big on basically this was the most decisive error of the game, but a number of improvements for both sides. Interesting game, a lot of instructive points. Thank you very much for sending it, and yeah, I really appreciate it. Please keep sending games. It's always good to get good ones to take a look at. Interesting, a lot of concepts here. All right, Tranquil Cloud, here's your game. Thank you very much for waiting, and let's take a look. You are playing as black here, so let's take it from your perspective. And here, white plays an early overextension. This, this is... there are things about it that are reasonable, but it does diffuse white's position. This e5, basically will become kind of a liability. I'm surprised. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong. I would say e5 is going to be really difficult to hold. It's going to turn into a very underminable French pawn. But okay, sure. I guess the Alekhine's is okay if you've played c5. So yeah, actually, this is interesting. This is not theory that I know, so I apologize. The e5 is actually a fine move here. Didn't know this. Yeah, no. I was totally wrong about that one. Interesting. Yeah, this is great. I actually, honestly, I love teaching. I would highly recommend it. I get to learn so many things that I don't know. Like, there's so much opening theory that like I have never played. So it's great to get to take a look at like other people's games and see what the main lines on those openings are. But yeah, totally have to own that I didn't know that was the book move there. Knight d5, knight b6 is fine. But yeah, I would never think to do this, to be honest. I'm not a Sicilian player, but Sicilian knight c6, I guess. All right. Anyways. Knight d4, pawn takes, and f4, d6, and basically black's looking fine. Bishop to g4 is probably the best. I don't know. Black has a good position. I feel like e5 is an overextension for white here. Could be wrong. But I just feel like it's easily undermined, and it's kind of wasteful. The pawn was basically better on e4 than it is on e5. So I don't know. d6, knight f3, bishop g4. Black's looking fine. So in terms of flipping the eval, this f4 was the move that flipped it. All right. So. One of the things that I do on this stream is I've tried to come up with an objective criteria for removing openings from people's opening repertoires. I need to do it myself, I'm sure, but one of the things is coming up. Someone asked me, how do you play openings? E5 is actually really interesting. I just think of it as being, you're moving the same pawn twice, and you're moving it to e5 where it's more vulnerable to attack. It's like. In the French, it's why, most people don't play the French advance, right? Because the French advance is considered to be sort of a waste of the, the extra e-pawn move, that tempo. So I would figure that the same principle would hold here. So I'm surprised that e5 is playable here. I think that this means that this opening has kind of more to do with the Alekhines than it does to do with the French, which sort of makes sense. But yeah. So when I'm considering moves that are in people's repertoire or not in people's repertoire, this f4 would fall short of the screening. So basically, the screening that I used, since it makes things easier to find kind of objective metrics. My objective metric for removing, basically saying an opening move is wrong, or should be removed. Basically, the concept here, Alekhines is e4, e4 knight f6 immediately, like one knight f6 on move one. But yeah, so the thing that's interesting here is basically, I say if a move is played less than 1% of the time, and like there's there's a big number of games, a move is played less than 1% of the time, and the eval shifts by more than half a point against you, then it's a move that you should remove from your opening repertoire. So here, it's pretty close, but f4 actually shifts the eval here 0.56 versus the second best move. So like, here it's 0.14 and here it's minus 0.42. So overall a 0.56 difference between the first best and second best moves. And instead, so that's criteria 1. And then criteria 2 is there's a well-established opening line here, and f4 is played less than 1% of the time. It's not even in here out of 3,600 games. So that's the criteria that I've been using to like screen moves out of people's opening repertoires. I think it's pretty good. It does screen out maybe one, like people have sent in enough openings now that there's somewhere I'm like on the edge of it. Like there's some Owens or English opening type things, things with very early B6s for black that I think might actually fit that criteria. But and I know that those aren't common at Grandmaster level, but they're more or less considered to be playable. Anyways, what I'm saying is that f4 shifts the eval more than 0.5 versus your best move, and it's played less than 1% of the time. So if you're playing a move like that and you're doing engine analysis, that's the criteria that I've been using. So I think white, I know this is your game, Tranquil Cloud, but if you were in white's position here, you shouldn't play f4 because it falls short of that screening criteria. D6, knight f3, bishop g4, and basically I like basically the shift in this game was that f4 move. By the way, the f4 move shifts the eval in this game from basically a slight white advantage to a recognizable black advantage. Black has big leads in development. D6 is also a move that's played frequently in the Alekhines, so it's kind of interesting. This sort of transposes it into an Alekhine-like system from the Sicilian Alepin. Interesting. So yeah, black should continue to develop. Now black's got great development. Bishop takes f3 appears to be playable, and this looks like a tactical error. So yeah, basically, I have a whole bunch of tactical resources, a whole bunch of tactical trainers in the Discord, but I think they're really helpful. Like, I think if you're under 2,000, the percentage of the game percentage of your study time that you should spend on tactics is very high, like probably more than 50%. Like, the percentage of games that are determined by a tactical oversight, at club level is extremely high, probably more than half. So, this is an error, unfortunately. Bishop to h5 and g4 and f5, and this bishop gets stuck. So yeah, so g4 here, d takes e5 is the best, but I don't know, say d takes e5 again, bishop g6, and eventually f5 is going to get played and win this bishop. So that's a big error actually for black. So yeah, so I think it's mostly about tactics here. I think instead, basically on h3 you have the opportunity. Yeah, no worries. No, I mean, no, it's no problem at all. I mean, it's it's mostly just I think we all go through a stage where we need to do tactical improvements. So that kind of thing. We all miss those types of things from time to time, but like I think your best route to improvement in these situations is a lot of tactics training. I think tactics training, is a very underrated type of an underrated type of study tool. I think the thing about tactics training is like you really have an opportunity to objectively improve. So the study training that I always pitch to everybody is I say 1 hour to 2 hours a day of a tactics trainer of your choice for a month. That could be chess.com Puzzle Battle or chess.com Puzzle Rush or any of the free options that are also available. So Lichess or Chess Tempo or anything really. Any tactics trainer will work. But do like 1 hour to 2 hours of tactics training per day for a month, and it will definitely improve your game. Like it's not something that a teacher can help you with, but it's definitely it will very objectively improve your game at club level. At some point you have to go, basically back and study positional play, study openings, all that kind of stuff. But I think in terms of maximizing your study time through club level, it's just a whole ton of tactics training. Like just really just drill tactics, hours and hours of it. Every master spent 1,000 hours plus on tactics, probably more. So yeah, h3, bishop takes f3 is better. Bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and d takes e5, and then basically knight to d4 on the next move. So basically here, this should end up being a pretty good situation for black. Winning chances on the d4 pawn are particularly good. But yeah, continuing on this, knight takes c3. Uh, yeah, yeah, you got to be careful with these, with these bishops, right? It's kind of a dangerous situation. Bishop takes f3, is objectively better than bishop to h5. But the truth of the matter is h5 lost to the tactical, the tactical g4 f5 situation. So, yeah, I think bishop takes f3 is a little bit better, but yeah, I mean, you could also consider, bishop d7 if you want. Yeah, no, you can keep, you can basically maintain the pin or trade off the bishop for the knight. But I think bishop takes f3 is, in this situation, especially since you have potential tactics, potential threats on the d4 pawn, sacrificing that bishop for that knight is particularly, it's a generally better thing to do in this position than some, just because that d4, basically becomes a problem. Anyways, bishop to b5, queen a5, knight takes, sure. Bishop takes. This all looks fine. Basically white's sort of cementing his material advantage. Yeah, I mean, you continue to be careful about this. Even here, you have to make sure that you don't hang this bishop. This threat has not gone away. G4, f5, that's a problem for black. So here, bishop to d or queen to d3 is a tactical error. Here you just lose the bishop because this threat has not disappeared, right? Basically G4 has been available to white. Basically this entire set of exchanges. So when black, doesn't do anything about this, this G4 threat, it just continues to be an available option for white to play. Luckily, it never happened. So here, a lot of complicated tricks happen. Yeah, and black ends up winning. But honestly, the main thing is I want to study more the strategic aspects of this. Bishop f3 leads to a win of either the d4 pawn or a win of the center. So you have to be careful with that. These tactics, basically tactics are difficult. G4 is going to be available to this bishop unless black does something about it. So, that's sort of a necessity for black. In terms of improving this game, so basically I think by this point, kind of the strategy aspects of this game have kind of concluded. Black is, black has a way better position. He's going to be able to get threats on f4. White has bad king safety. And with a move like, queen e2 here, yeah, black should be up by a lot. Bishop takes f4 is also playable, is a playable tactic. The bishop is pinned, and then if the king takes it, then you can just castle and castle into check. So that's big. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the main point of this game is that it had a lot of, it basically turned into tactical play. The issue with tactical play is I can't improve on the computer there. The computer lines are better than any human can play at tactical play at this point. So, for me, it's easier to, make subjective assessments based on, on positional considerations, but that sort of disappears by then. In terms of ways that black, I think, should have played it, be ready to exchange this bishop for, on f3, particularly if there are tactics associated with it. But setting the dial on when to trade your bishop for this knight on f3, making that determination, you should be more erring on the side of being willing to trade the bishop off. Here you played to h5 and it could have gotten trapped. It also. Yeah, here, I can send you this, the Discord link. If anyone wants to send in games, they can just submit them on the, Yeah, the Discord. The Discord has a game submission section, and if you send them there, they'll get reviewed in a couple days or so. But yeah, thanks for asking, and yeah, feel free. Um, so yeah, bishop to h5 and g4 and f5, and this black bishop gets trapped. So yeah, so this turn's tactical. Bishop takes f3 was a better tactic. Yes, so that's the first thing. Is I think that your best route forward, if you were to study, if you get the time to study and you're interested in studying and improving your game, go to Chess Tempo. Go to Chess Tempo, or there's a standalone program called CT-ART. That was the one that I used to go from about 1200 to about 2000. Basically that type of program, either online or as a program, is the best way forward. So that's where I think you should spend time, Tranquil Cloud. Really get your tactics as strong as possible. The percentage of games that end in a tactical error at 1400 level, at that basically at that level, I would say 60-70% of games end on a tactical level. Nah, CT Art is its own program. Chess Tempo is a tactics trainer, but it's an old app. It's been around a long time, man. It's been probably around for 20 years or so. But it's a really good program. It basically turns tactics into modules. So you'll be able to drill 100 type of this type of tactic, and then 100 type of a different type of tactic. And I don't know if it's free. For some reason, I believe there used to be a free version online. I'm not sure if there still is. But yeah, it's a great program. Definitely really helpful. But even if you don't have access to that or don't want to pay for that, feel free to use Chess Tempo. Chess Tempo is a free online program, and I think Lee Chess has some free tactics stuff too. So whatever works. Queen a4, queen e4. But the thing is, you're just sort of trading tactical shots with your opponent at this point. So whoever plays in a more tactically accurate way is going to win this. So yeah, if basically at this point, their strategy's kind of over. It's mostly about playing well tactically, and as a result, you're going to get a lot of positions like this, when you're playing. So it's really important that your tactics are as good as possible, and if they are, then your chance of winning these types of positions is a lot higher. But yeah, this all made sense. By this point, black's got a good position. White's king safety is totally compromised. Yes, I mean, not exclusively. I mean, positional play is also important. But I would say that, especially, the threshold that I use is 2,000. But below 2,000, it's very heavily skewed towards tactics. The reason I think that a lot of people don't like or don't like talking about tactics to help people improve is because you can't really teach tactics. I can't do anything to improve your tactical vision. That's just work that you're going to have to be interested in doing and do on yourself, do by yourself. It's like, a coach can't really help with that. I can go through opening lines, or I can make suggestions based on a type of opening, but at the end of the day, until you're about 2,000, by far the most the most important thing is to be able to play accurately and see 2 and 3 move combinations. And tactics training is how you do that. I could set up tactics on the board, but I just can't do it nearly as fast as the programs can. I could set up tactics and explain them, and maybe I can do that, for some more complicated situations. I'm down to try, but the main, the very large bulk of the time that you spend studying tactics. Yeah, exactly. That's absolutely right. That's the perfect way of saying it, Tranquil. And that's why teachers don't really spend much time on it, because it's I very heavily emphasize it. I think it's, how you improve, but it's not something that a teacher can particularly help with. It's like weightlifting or running or doing some type of exercise. You just have to kind of, be disciplined, put in the work yourself, and the resources are there, but People can't make them, make you do them. You have to be driven enough to do them yourself. No, it is. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, Tranquil. I mean, it's basically you gotta study. The thing that I like, and I'm totally the same way. Like I'm like, for me, chess needs to be fun. Otherwise, it's not. Otherwise, I don't like doing it. One of the things that I think one of the greatest, and again, like I'm not trying to endorse anything, but one of the greatest programs that I think exists is a Puzzle Battle on chess.com. Basically turning tactics training into a competition is like, and there's other places that did it. Like I think there's Chessity or whatever. I mean, there's a few places that turn tactics training into a competition. For me, it's much more easy to do it if I'm like, competing in puzzles against somebody else. At least then it's a competition and I can like play off against somebody. I think Lee Chess might have a competitive tactics trainer too. I haven't tried it, but anyways, the main point is, I can't do it unless it's fun for me. Puzzle Rush. Yeah. No, but I mean, Puzzle Rush is cool too, and Puzzle Rush is fun and helpful and stuff, but I actually really like Puzzle Battle, because Puzzle Battle is the one where you're actually competing against somebody else to do puzzles accurately faster, and that's really helpful for me. So I think Lee Chess has it too. I haven't used it, I don't know. But whatever, doing stuff like that makes it much more fun and easy for me to be disciplined enough to do it. So anyways, that's my main thinking on that. But yeah, that's the next step. I mean, basically 3/4 of this game are spent on tactical play, and the more accurate your tactical play is, and the fewer errors you make, the more likely you are to play better than your opponent and win. It's just a percentages thing. You could study a lot of opening theory before someone plays into the exact lines that but tactics are, basically present in every single game. There's always tactical play. So making sure that your tactics are as good as they can possibly be is a very key part to improving as quickly as possible. So that's my suggestion on that. It's just I think where amateur players should be spending the most, players under 2,000 should be spending the most time that they can on tactics. You can always circle back later and learn the theoretical stuff, but every game is going to involve tactical situations, so you really want to maximize on that topic. Anyways, you sent a really interesting game. Thank you very much for sending the game, Tranquil Cloud. I learned something. I didn't know that knight f6 ran into e5 in the Sicilian Alpin. I probably should have, but I don't. So it's really helpful for me to get to see this game. No, thank you for sending the game, Tranquil, and thanks very much for participating in the stream. It's really helpful, and I appreciate it. And I actually got to learn this opening line a little bit better, which is always helpful. I've never played this as either. I guess I have played the Sicilian Alpin a little. But like I've basically never played this as either white or black, so I'm sort of filling in gaps in my opening theory knowledge with this game. Interesting. Anyways, thank you, Tranquil, and feel free to send in as many games in the future as you'd like. Like definitely always can send in more stuff. Okay, on to the next one. This is the Ponziani opening. This one I think is from Tarash, but I am not 100% on that. Ponziani opening is an interesting, opening. Basically, c3 and d4 is the key part there. But yeah. Here we go. So Ponziani opening. Ponziani opening is defined as c3 or knight f3, knight c6, c3 against the e4, e5 king's pawn game. Realistically, it's not super good for white. It is probably it. Let's see if it fails that criteria. I'm like obsessed with this criteria that I've created now. I think it actually fails the criteria. So it's. Yeah, no, thank you for being here, Tranquil. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for joining the stream. Yeah, thanks. Feel free to send as many games as you like too. So knight f3, knight c6, and then c3 is actually failing on the criteria of, does it shift the game by more than half a pawn, which it does. So basically best move here or actually I'll run it as the report. But basically, the first criteria is it played more than 1% of the time. Here, it's like borderline, but slightly less than 1% of the time. And then the analysis is c3, half a pawn worse than the best opening move here. So I think, bishop to c4, 0.16. I don't know if that's the best move, actually, to be honest. Knight c3. All right, maybe it passes on that on the eval test. It only shifts the opening by or bishop b5 is considered to be the best. So 0.16 for bishop b5 and minus 0.26 for c3. So anyways, I think c3 runs into that issue. But yeah, c3 is a is a less commonly played opening that leads the eval in black's direction. But I guess still playable. More playable than I thought it was. All right. Queen to c2. That's interesting. In terms of opening lines, queen to c2 is again way down the list. This looks okay. I wouldn't say queen c2 is a bad move, but much more common is d4 or d3 here. d4 is the I guess these are all considered to be Janish counterattack. Okay. But yeah, Janish counterattack, I guess, is defined by knight to f6. And queen c2 here is interesting. Queen c2 solves the problem of holding on to the e4 pawn. That can be kind of tricky in this opening. Quick d4s lead to the e4 pawn being, hanging for a lot of situations. But queen c2 holding on to e4. E takes d5, queen takes d5, and basically I sort of, I basically like black's position here. Basically all of black's knights and queen are more active than white's. And white's going to have difficulty developing his queenside knight to a good place. Probably the best is knight to a3. This could potentially run into bishop takes a3, which is annoying, but might be the best developing square. So overall, I'm really liking black's position. I think that e takes d5 was an error. E takes d5 runs into this good queen takes d5. Instead, I think the move was d3. Yeah, if you look at this, 38 out of 39 games were d3 here, and I think d3 provides a more solid situation. If you play pawn takes d5, black's development advantage is just glaring here. This is rough. D3 I think is better. Anyways, now black's leading in development, and white has to sort of decide what to do. Probably the best ideas for white. This is just not a good position, to be completely honest. White's down a pawn positionally. The best ideas for white are probably to quickly develop. Things like bishop to e3, things like knight to d2. Overall, I think this plays out a lot better for white. And c4 is not correct. Probably the engine is pushing for knight to h4. I'm sure that's objectively the best. I would look at like bishop to e3. I don't know. Bishop to e3, how about bishop to g5? How's that go? Yeah, it's sort of a tricky position for white, to be honest. Yeah, knight h4 is objectively the best. Other moves here include queen to b3, basically threatening this queen and, potentially saving the d3 pawn. An issue for white's going to be that this bishop is pinning the d3 pawn to the queen, and that, black's going to get more force on d3. So the d3 pawn's going to be both pinned and attacked, and that's going to be a problem for white. White will probably have to play queen to b3 or knight to h4. But yeah, I think here, white's, I don't know, white's certainly at a disadvantage. His development is much worse, and he can't even really develop his knight to a very good square. So c4 is a challenge of the queen. I think queen to b3 is actually a much, so I think that challenging the queen is not a bad idea. The second best move here is queen to b3, and with queen to b3, you're basically knocking this queen off of, this square where it's attacking d3. Basically queen takes b3, pawn takes b3, castles will lead white to have some ability to defend this pawn. So let's just look at this line. Pawn takes, and then, the enemy has white giving up this pawn, but I guess with some compensation, like b4, b5 look pretty solid. Anyways, white's looking fine, and yeah, I mean, what else can sort of be done? Like c4, queen to d7, bishop to e2, and this, so queen to b3 was a more effective way to challenge the queen on d5. With c4, you're challenging the queen on d5, but in kind of a superficial way that doesn't really advance your position. One interesting improvement is this knight can move to c3. Now it actually has regained its natural developing square, so that's good at least. But the pressure that black's going to get on d3 is probably just going to be too powerful. Anyways, this is all going really well for black until a5. On a5, there's some crazy tactic. So let's see. I'm sort of blanking on why this is so good for. What am I missing? Doesn't look that good to me. Yeah, like you win an exchange, but I wouldn't say it's a 4-point lead. That's weird. All right, let's go back. That's a really quiet move to be. I guess it's saying that basically just neutralizing the attack. So it's not specific to bishop to g4 or bishop to f4, I think. Or no, I guess it is. I guess it is specific to bishop f4, just because tactically speaking, it's specific to bishop f4. A knight to g5, knight to e4 can be played with a threat. But yeah, this was taking me a while to figure out why specifically like bishop to f4 was good. But here on a5, bishop f4, and you basically have your king side adequately defended, and you're gonna end up playing knight takes rook and like winning an exchange. 4 still seems like a generous eval, but yeah, at least it resolves the problem. So the quick swing here, basically white's playing in a dangerous situation, and black actually basically gets a winning tactic here. Bishop takes f2 is really bad for white. This leads to, so if king h1, queen takes f1. No, so it's actually a really good question, Mole Man. It's basically, basically the question here is, you're editing this, basically you're looking at this, and the issue is not that bishop f4 is particularly good for white. It's that these threats on f2 are dangerous enough for white that no. So that's what it is, Mole Man. It's basically this threat. This threat on f2 is so dangerous that that f4 is really the resource that saves it. So queen takes e2. Knight takes f7 is an inaccuracy. It's basically you need, white is the computer is basically advocating fixing the back rank, bishop f4 fixes the back rank, so that should be played over knight takes f7. So yeah, so bishop f4, and this position's still good for black, but not nearly as good because of the back rank issues. After knight takes f7, black has nearly mating attacks on the back rank. So here, bishop takes f2, king f1 is unplayable, or king h1 is unplayable because queen takes f1, and then rook takes is also really problematic because rook to e8. Queen takes d1, queen takes rook f1, and queen to d4. This is this is pretty rough for black, pretty rough for white. This just leads to a win for black. So it's not that bishop f4 is good. It's just that it fixes a very pressing problem for white. So after that, white plays bishop to f4, and black no longer has these issues. Instead, white plays knight takes h8. I think here, it gets into a complicated position because I was like, well, bishop takes f2, doesn't that lead to the same issues? Like rook to 8, f2, rook to d1, queen takes, rook f1, queen d4. But the main difference in those situations, this position versus the one that we were just looking at with bishop takes f2, is really just the material situation. If you do bishop takes f2 here, like right now, rook takes, and then rook, and then the queen has to sacrifice for the bishop and the rook to prevent getting mated. That's a bad trade for white. But here, white actually gets enough material out of it. So knight takes h8, and then bishop takes f2, and then if the trade goes down as rook, queen takes rook, queen takes queen, rook f1. Now basically, black has gotten enough, or white has enough of a material advantage that it's going to lead to a pretty difficult game for black to win. There still might be opportunities here. I mean, queen takes c4 potentially, and then queen b1. But black is if black wins this knight uncompensated, he's still gonna only have a queen to 2 rooks. So it becomes a very tough game for black to win. So I was stumped by bishop f1 for a second, but or bishop f4 for a second. But the thing is, it resolves the problem on f2. That's why it's like that. And then we're kind of in a tactical mess, which swings, like basically it swings towards black, and then black misses something like rook a d1, and there's a mate in 4 with knight to h3. I thought knight to h3, yeah. Oh no, it's pinned. Okay, so knight takes d1, check. Yeah, this is terrible for white. Because knight takes d1 is check, and then basically super volatile game that black ends up winning. Let's just look at the report. All this volatility basically is tactical play and tactical inefficiency. This tactical play would get ironed out with enough tactical study. So I recommend studying your tactics, and if you're playing white here, try to make sure that you don't allow these swings into black's advantage. Anyways, this game c3. Basically, black got this very effective threats on d3. Overall, I guess I'm just not sold on this opening. The Ponziani opening with this early c3, not particularly strong. It doesn't develop, and it often leads to issues with white developing the queenside knight correctly. c4 pushed the game further in black's favor, and this pawn on d3 is really an issue. So bishop takes, queen there. Overall, black ends up in a good situation. White misses some tactical opportunities, and both players basically miss some tactical opportunities in the end. The engine analyzes a chaotic game where both players had many chances to win. That's certainly right. So the main recommendations from white's perspective, I guess I would say, don't play c3. Ponziani opening is right on the verge of getting taken out based on that criteria system that I made up. So I think it's really not a very good idea. And then queen c2 in the Ponziani opening doesn't develop your pieces. So by this point, white has a pretty substantial development problem. d3 is a better play than pawn takes d5 here. d3 is played in, I think, 38 out of 39 games or something. Pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4, and at least you don't bring the queen forward. It's just this additional development of the queen that really make black just way ahead in development. And not just development, but kind of the how strong the development is. Knight to a3 is a square that white probably shouldn't even develop to. So it's going to take a while for white to get all of his pieces out. So a lot of these problems started with that Ponziani opening. By this point, the threats on d3 are getting to be really problematic. Queen b3 was a slight improvement over c4, but white was still losing. Queen b3 to threaten the queen as opposed to c4 to threaten the queen was a little better. But by now, it's basically a big black lead, and then there's a whole bunch of crazy tactics where both players had chances to win. So at the end of the day, takeaways, don't play the Ponziani opening. If you do play the Ponziani opening, take good care of, basically don't speed up black's development, because that development is going to be a lasting disadvantage for white. So don't expedite black's even further. And then the game came down to a tactical situation. I would just say, make sure your tactics are solid and strong. Overall, very interesting situation. Thank you very much for sending the game. All right, Call Me Coach's game is next. We've got 2 more for the night. Call Me Coach always writes these really good analysis, so I know exactly what to focus on. Sometimes I forget before I go back to them, but what should be considered? Call Me Coach asks, what should be taken into consideration when deciding to close up an outpost by trading off your good knight for a worse minor piece? Really good question. When to basically trade your knight on an outpost for a piece? Good question. The question, check out move knight h2, and then for the next 9 moves. I'm just sort of reading through this. I read through it before, but I want to make sure that okay, really good questions. Coach asks some very good questions about when to trade off your knight from an outpost and when to allow your outpost to be disrupted by a pawn. Or basically, I just want to read the last question. It's great. The way that Coach writes these questions makes the analysis super easy to do. I can really focus and give the question as much time as I have. If you have an advanced outpost primed for a knight to hop to, what are the factors to consider when deciding to preserve the outpost or to close it with a pawn? Very good question. All right, so let's take it from black's perspective. c5, bishop to c4. This we know. Basically we know that that bishop to c4 prior to e5 is a good, is basically a good play. Bishop to 4 prior to e5 is not a very good play. Bishop to c4 after e5 in the Sicilian is a good play. This bishop will end up running into this pawn on e6 and potentially the pawn on d5. So for those reasons, I think that bishop is not super strong on that play. Anyways, black is looking solid. Castles, knight d2, rook to e8, and bishop takes, c3, and basically I like black's position here. Black has developed in a very healthy looking way, no issues. White has played, for some reason, a pretty weak line in the Sicilian. Sicilian lines with bishop c4, where the bishop on c4 runs into e6 and d5, tend to be very good for black. And here, black's position is black's definitely on the better side of this. Black has almost complete control of the center, a rook on an open file, and a bishop on a fianchetto. It's just a great situation. Better minor pieces. Really, really good start here. Okay, so I assume that knight outpost is going to be, I'm guessing right now it's b3, but you said start on move 18. The knight really wanted to play knight to b3. Oh, sorry, knight to c3. Oh wait, no, I just want to make sure. Yeah, good question. I feel like publishing that question somewhere. No problem. No, it's a really good question. So yeah, so when should you play knight b3 here? Well, the engine says immediately, right? So we're all kind of biased. No, it's perfect. No, leave it, feel free to leave it as is. It's always really helpful for you to write these analysis because I can really think about this for a few minutes. You can, I think that's in your settings. The orange one comes from right-clicking and holding down. The green one, I think, is in your settings, if I remember correctly. The other one, this orange one, you can do by right-clicking on an analysis board, but the green one, I'm not sure. It's just always been that way for me, I think. So yeah, when do you play knight b3? So we're definitely biased by the engine, which says play knight b3 immediately. But why, really? Well, definitely now. Right now, definitely knight to b3. To b1. Maybe. Really good question. Yeah, because it does feel like this knight to b3 option seems almost interchangeable from move to move. So why is it so much better that that black plays knight to b3 on move move 19 than move, like, why here is knight b3 a -3 move, and why here is it a minus, is it an equals move? What fundamentally changed about that position to make the difference in the evals like that? We'll think about it. I'm thinking that it's mainly an advantage of the ability to get to e2 with the rook, but the really early ones don't even have that. So Knight to b3, bishop to takes b3, a takes b3. Overall here, I mean, black is better. Rook to e2 looks good. Bishop to f5 looks good. How about knight b3, knight takes b3? Then what happens? Then you just get the e-file. Interesting. Yeah, so I guess what it really is, or at least what I'm sort of seeing here is, it's definitely the strongest when the rook has the access to the e2 file. Here, I'm not sure it's recommending b3 on every move, but starting on move 19, basically here, right? It's a bishop move. And then, but here's probably more telling, is here, basically this knight b3 is barely better than bishop to g3. I guess knight takes b3 is best on every move. It's a really good question. So you've asked how do basically how do you determine when to play knight b3 in this situation? I don't know. I guess I'm sort of I'm sort of wondering how much you should be continuing action on the queen file or on the queen side. I think that basically knight to b3 is a good way to play a final move on the queen side. So the knight moves to b3, and then and then you can sort of shift things to the king side. Like, know that basically you're better off on the queen side. The queen side is locked, and then move the play to the king side. But yeah, in terms of determining when to play knight to b3, the answer is knight to b3 was the favored move at every point along here. Basically from move 19, like you were saying, to move 25 or so, knight to b3 was considered to be the best move, basically until it was played on move 27. So the answer is knight to b3 was always a good move here. There was never a situation in which, it was not black's best option. In terms of determining whether to play it or not, I think that just locking it up is good. I think what you're evaluating here basically is the strength of the knight on a5 versus the strength of a pawn on b3. So it's more to do with the strength of, basically moving the knight to b3 and locking up the pawn structure. The knight has no utility on a5, really. The knight has been committed to the queen side here, right? So it's on the queen side, it's stuck on the queen side, and there's no issues for the knight on a5 looking into b3. That's just true. So here, the knight can move to, the knight can move to b3. The pawn can take on b3, and it will be fine. So it's not as if you're so the answer is always in a situation like this. Like, if your option is to have the knight on a5, or to have traded the knight on on b3 for a pawn, it's still better to have traded the knight on b3 for a pawn. This knight has no utility right there. It would be better, b3 would be stronger in particular if you were able to draw this knight off and then you were able to get the knight posted. But having an unposted knight set over on the side of the board as opposed to a posted and then immediately replaced knight, that trade is not particularly good for black. That trade is not particularly good for white. Like, basically, your choice is, so the knight's on a5. I would just treat the position as, something that's totally static here. Like, you're just determining, what to do. There's been no game before this, and, you don't know what's going to happen after this. Your question is, do you want the knight on a5, or do you want to try posting the knight and have it get immediately replaced? And the answer is, get the knight posted and have it immediately replaced, because this knight is doing nothing right now. It's not, it's basically not helping to have the knight, on a5. This is a nothing position. Nothing's happening on any of the squares that the knight can directly move to. It's not until it goes to b3 that it even begins to launch a threat. So that's the idea. The answer in this situation is you should always be playing the knight to b3, because the knight is always ineffective on a5. If there's better opportunities on the king side, then feel free to move the knight to the king side. But getting the knight to b3, always demonstrates its strength relative to just hanging on a5. It's too bad that the white knight is there, but it's not worth holding on to this knight on a5 with the hope, some abstract hope, that this knight is going to move off of d2 and give you the opportunity to play a knight b3 posting freely. So you basically should play, as soon as you play knight to a5, you should be willing to play knight to b3, because you're in that situation. You're trading what is essentially a knight that's not that useful on a5 for a knight that's also not particularly useful on b2 or on d2. But the knight, basically the knight as an attacking piece, the knight as a permanent posting piece, is just never going to happen. I mean, you have no way to force it to happen. So it's not really adding any huge amount of value on a5. Play knight b3 immediately. Let white take with whatever piece, and that's and that's what's going to happen to the knight. Removing this pawn from the rook file does increase your rook's mobility. It increases your endgame position a little, maybe not a lot. But with the knight on a5 and is the position taken, just for itself, you should play knight to b3, because it is the move that that advances the potential. Yeah, well, the thing is, you have no way of forcing it to reach its potential. If you had a move like, bishop takes d2, and then you could safely play b3, then sure. But it's, it's better to get rid of this knight on a5 because it's inactive. Here basically the trade is this inactive knight for this somewhat active knight, and that's actually a good trade. This knight as an extremely valuable piece posted on b3 is never really destined to happen, because it's not this knight as a permanent outpost on b3 is never going to happen, because you can't force it to happen. It can only happen if you trade off this knight. For as long as this knight on d2 is there, some vision of a well-posted knight on b3 can't actually occur. It's a really, really good question, though, and I think that's I'm pretty sure that's the answer. Feel free to ask other masters, but yeah, it's basically like, you can't count on the potential of this knight in a situation that you can't secure. If you could secure a situation in which you could get the knight to b3 safely, then hold on to the knight and wait for it to get to b3 safely. But as long as the d2 knight is there, you just can't force the knight to work on b3. It's just not gonna work out if you don't clear this first. Anyways, interesting situation. Thank you very much for sending it, Coach. Thank you very much for asking such a great question. Really had to think about that one, and I'm 85% sure that I got it right. But feel free. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a really good question. It's a really good question. But yeah, the answer in this situation is compare the knight to what it can reasonably become potentially, not what it ideally could become potentially. As long as this knight's on d2, you have no way of securing it on b3. But I'm pretty sure that's the answer. Really, really good question though. Great positional thought. So, yeah, thank you very much for sending the game, Coach. In terms of other things from this game, I think you played pretty solidly. Nothing too, too exciting. You capitalized on that bishop on c4. That was good for you for sure. And yeah, this turned into a really good solid mate. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Z1 and Thierry10. Thank you guys very much for the follows. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Anyways, interesting situation. Thank you very much for sending it. And yeah, thanks, Coach. I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving a good question to think about. Really a good one. Cool. Thanks both for the follows, Thierry and Z1. Appreciate it. All right. So this is the last game of the night. Yeah, no. I appreciate it. Call me Coach. Feel free to. My rap, not that high. I'm about. I mean, rapid. My USCF is somewhere between 2200 and 2250. But rapid is probably, I guess rapid is like game in 15, game in 25. It's probably like 2250 to 2300. Anyways, I'm interested in teaching. I'm not too I'm like 2200 to 2250, something like that. But honestly, I'm really just mostly about teaching at this point. It's pretty good. I would say pretty good. There's better, but it's pretty good. Anyways, in this situation, castles, bishop e3, pawn takes, queen e7, and yeah, things are going pretty well for white, but d4 leads to problems on e4. D4 allows knight takes e4. So this e4 pawn, causes an issue. This basically wins a pawn for black. Knight takes, and then white's just fine. Hey, what's up, Ashton? Thanks for sending this game. I appreciate it. Yeah, we should take it from your perspective. Sorry, sometimes I get people's names confused between their Discord and their Twitch and everything. But yeah, so white, white's basically going along the opening. Black's playing a solid opening also, and then the move here was knight takes e4. This is just a tactic. This is a big improvement. So basically when black plays this, he's up by a pawn at least. Threats on e4 are good, and this is an error. I don't know why white did this, but you can play bishop takes f5 cleanly, and that's fine. Bishop takes f5, pawn takes f5. I don't know, queen e3, I guess. But overall, black is in great shape after that. See if it ever swings back. Nope, not really. Anyways, really interesting situation. Bishop takes d3, f takes e3, queen e7. And yeah, black's playing well. The real improvement, so the only two improvements I think were both based off of kind of tactical errors that white made. This bishop takes f5 is a big error for white, and the earlier d4 hangs this e4 pawn, and if you take the e4 pawn, then black's got a really good position. So between those two, I think black just gets a really solid game. By this point, black's up a piece and it's closing out, ready to win. But yeah, really interesting situation, Ashton. Interesting game. I want to make sure that we. So basically, again, that I'm gonna say tactics, right? Like, tactics is where, I would say 90% of games at your level are determined. Tactical study and you will improve very quickly. So like chess tempo or CT-ART or anywhere on Lead Chess, I guess, has tactics training. But whatever gets you there, the next thing that you should do in terms of improving your chess is get a tactics trainer and then just do like an hour or two of it a day for like a month. It'll really, really help. I don't know how much you'll improve, but I bet at your level it will be pretty noticeable. A big part of improving is being able to calculate more and more accurately. So I think that's the way to do it, Ashton, for sure. Is it a good question? The C file out from in front of the rook. I just want to make sure, on terms of the C file, do you mean the F file or the C file like in the Sicilian? Yeah, F file. Yeah, no worries, no worries. Usually it has to do with king safety. When you move your F pawn, you're usually worsening your king safety in some way. If it can be, at the same time, moving the F pawn can be, very valuable in attacks. So it's really about coming up with how dangerous is that open diagonal on your king gonna become. And if it's not that dangerous, of the three pawns on a castled king, moving the F pawn is the least dangerous of F pawn, G pawn, and H pawn. But yeah, it's a tough question. Knight takes e4 is better than d4 here, and yeah, bishop takes f5 is the right move here. Yeah, I mean, overall, it's tough questions. I think the main idea behind, basically the main question behind moving the C file out from, or moving the pawn out on the F file is how good a resource it provides on the attacking side versus how much of a problem it will cause you in terms of king safety on the king side. There's lines like the Sicilian Grand Prix where you castle kingside and then potentially move your king to h1 as an escape square if you need it. Where f5 is f5 is always played in the Grand Prix, right? So Grand Prix goes e4, c5, knight c3, something's f4. And yeah, so it's basically like if it doesn't hurt your king safety, but it can be a useful thing in attacking the opponent's king, then moving your f pawn is the right move. If it's dangerous for your king, then it's probably not the right move. Other things that can play into this are how loose your other pawns are. So that's the top level rule. It's comparing how valuable it is to your attack versus how dangerous it is to your king safety. That's the top line rule. Things that impact that are like, does your opponent have the same colored bishop as the g1 king in the f2 square? Like, has this bishop on c5 been traded off or not? If this bishop has been traded off, then it's probably fine to play f4. The only piece that can get in through this diagonal is the queen. But I don't know. It also depends on whether this attack is useful or not. Like in a situation where you're castled kingside, but your opponent is castled queenside. So say the king was castled queenside here, the king's on c1, the rook is on d8. there's probably not much utility to playing f4, and it could potentially weaken your king side. So that's the highest level rule of thumb. It's too broad a question to give a more specific answer, I think. But the answer at the end of the day is there's plenty of situations, particularly in the Sicilian, where you can get good play out of f4, and you shouldn't, even though it does worsen your king's safety, it can sometimes still be a very good move to play. It's a tough question though. Again, really, yeah, good thinking on these. Okay. So in terms of looking at this game, Ashton, this is a really interesting situation. Yeah, no, thanks for asking it, Limestone. Always feel free to participate. I can't promise I always get the questions right, but I think I usually do, and yeah, they're really good for me to think about. Coach's question too was just awesome. Yeah, no, it was really awesome. Thank you guys all very much for asking these questions. They're good ones. So anyways, in this game, the main improvements came on d4. Knight takes e4 was a good move. Yep, good play for black. Wins the pawn. And then the next one was on rook to f5. Bishop takes f5. And I think between those two, you end up in a winning position. So the main piece of advice that I have to give on this is just really, really do your tactics. I know there's a few people on the Discord who are giving... yeah, well, I always do things on chess.com, to be honest, Thierry 10. I always, I have some interest in becoming a chess.com streamer. I don't know if they'll take me or not. They never got back to me on becoming a streamer, so I don't know. It's a good question, but I do plenty of Lee chess games too, Thierry. I do Lee chess all the time, and I just export them from Lee chess and bring them into chess.com. There's no reason I have to do it that way. My hope is to become a chess.com partner. We'll see if that actually happens, but maybe not. I should probably get more access onto that. But if you have a game on Lee chess, feel free to send it. If you send it Lee chess, I will look at it. Yeah, I mean I'll bring it into the chess.com interface, but I take Lee chess games all the time. If you want to send a Lee chess game on the Discord, feel free to. So yeah, Thierry, if you've got if I don't know if you're I know you just started following tonight, but if you've got any games, feel free to submit them on this Discord. The Discord with the game submission tab is this one, and feel free to send whatever you like. Anyways, interesting situation. Thank you very much for sending the game, Ashton. I think your biggest way to step forward here is with tactics. I think tactics training, and you'll be in very good shape. Yeah, there's a bunch of people on the Discord, Ashton. Yeah, of course. No, thank you very much for sending it, Thierry, and appreciate it. But yeah, so yeah, Ashton, send as many games as you like. But I think your quickest way forward is just to get a tactics trainer and do it for like an hour or two a day for a month. There's a few people in the Discord who are also putting a lot of time in on tactics trainers. I don't know if it helps you to get a frame of reference of how they're improving, but I strongly believe that it's your best route to improvement. I think it is. I mean, I would say below 2,000 level, it's the best route to improvement. It's a very underrated way to improve. So anyways, I think I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for sending the game, Ashton. Interesting stuff. Basically I thought the opening made complete sense, and then, you got into a tactical situation and capitalized. But just at the level that you're at, with good tactical strength, you're going to be in great shape to improve if you can recognize tactical positions better and play more accurately. Anyways, thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to wrap up for the night. Really appreciate it. Thank you all very much for being here and for contributing games to the stream. Next game is at 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, about 8.5 hours from now. And yeah, thank you very much. Thanks all for being here. Thanks all for participating, and have a good night. See you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.